The film begins in the 1930s near the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Hercules Poirot, a famous Belgian investigator, tries to figure out who stole a sacred relic from a room where a priest, a rabbi, and an imam were holding a discussion under the watch of the chief of police. Poirot deduces from a single crack in the wall that the culprit was actually the chief of police, who tries but fails to flee. With the perpetrator apprehended and the artifact retrieved, Poirot looks forward to his approaching vacation and a break from investigative work. Poirot boards a boat from Istanbul, where he meets governess Mary Debenham, as well as a young black doctor named Arbuthnot. When he arrives, he runs into his old acquaintance Bouc, who is now the director of the famous Orient Express. Unfortunately, just as the two are getting acquainted, a telegram from London arrives for Poirot. A case requires his immediate attention. Poirot is upset that his long-awaited vacation has been cut short, but Bouc offers to transport him to France on the Orient Express. The trip will last 3 days, and Poirot is content with having that much time to unwind. The first night and day are uneventful, but Poirot is annoyed by having to share his room with McQueen. The next evening, Ratchet approaches Poirot and demands that he serve as his bodyguard for the remainder of the trip, claiming that he has been receiving threatening letters from past clients to whom he sold fake paintings. Poirot, who dislikes Ratchet right away, rejects on the grounds that he searches out criminals and would not assist them. Ratchet offers increasing sums of money and even threatens Poirot indirectly with a gun, but Poirot refuses to be bought or frightened and leaves in disgust. That night, Poirot looks forward to a good night's sleep but finds it lacking. First, there is a noise that appears to come from the compartment next to his, but when the conductor, Pierre Mitchell, inquires about it, a voice responds that everything is fine. A bell and a tap also wake Poirot up, and during the disruptions, he notices a figure in a red kimono racing down the hallway. Meanwhile, an avalanche blocks the train's path, leaving everyone stuck on the track. Poirot is thrown out of bed, where he notices Marquez cleaning up spilt pictures. Because the express was supposed to arrive at their next destination the next day, everyone will have to wait for a rescue squad to arrive. Poirot discovers in the morning that Ratchet was murdered in his bed during the night, having been stabbed multiple times in a classic locked door case. Bouc requests that Poirot examine the case. However, Poirot first declines. After all, he was meant to be on vacation. Bouc begs him to investigate the murder because the Yugoslav police are likely to hunt for a scapegoat and may target Marquez or Arbuthnot. When confronted with this, an exasperated Poirot accepts. Poirot knows that any of the other passengers or the conductor may be the murderer after ascertaining that no one left or entered the carriage throughout the night, and that no one should be on the train. He hires Bouc as his helper. He couldn't be the murderer because he was sleeping in another wagon. An autopsy reveals that Ratchet was stabbed 12 times, yet the wounds are not consistent. While some are undoubtedly lethal, others are shallow. This implies that the murderer was inebriated. But Ratchet was physically fit, armed, and wary, so he was unlikely to be overwhelmed. Investigating his room, they find the threatening letters as well as a partially destroyed note connecting Ratchet to the case of Daisy Armstrong. Poirot remembers the case. Daisy Armstrong was a little girl who was kidnapped and then murdered despite the family paying the ransom, which caused her mother Sonia to go into premature labor, killing both her and her unborn child. Daisy's murderer was a man called Lanfranco Cassetti who got away with the crime, and Poirot and Bouc soon discover from the evidence that Ratchet was Cassetti and whoever killed him likely had a connection with that case. More evidence is discovered in Mrs. Hubbard's chamber, including a blood-stained handkerchief with the initial H and a button from a conductor's uniform. An examination of Mitchell's outfit reveals that all of the buttons are there, prompting an examination of everyone's bags. When the kimono he glimpsed the night before is discovered in his suitcase, Poirot deduces that the offender is attempting to outwit him. Mrs. Hubbard is later stabbed in the back, but the wound is slight and she is unable to determine who did it. The uniform with the missing button is later discovered on an overhead rack, thereby ending that lead. When a rescue team comes, they begin removing the Orient Express from the snow. When Poirot and Bouc meet with McQueen, they discover that he had a motive for the murder since he had been stealing money from Cassetti's accounts. They also discover a link to the Daisy Armstrong case. McQueen's father attempted to prosecute Armstrong's nursemaid, prompting her to commit suicide, and his career was ruined when the truth was revealed. Poirot discovers that many of the passengers had a connection to the Daisy Armstrong. Princess Dragomirov was Sonia Armstrong's godmother and a friend to her mother, Linda Arden. Schmidt was the Armstrongs' cook. Arbuthnot was in the army with Daisy's father. Marquez was the family's chauffeur. Pillar was Daisy's nursemaid and had fallen asleep when the girl was abducted. Debenham was Daisy's governess, and Masterman was the most important link, though, is the Countess Androny. She is Daisy's aunt, Helena Goldenberg. Despite this, Poirot is unable to determine who committed the crime. While questioning Debenham about the murder, he is accosted by Arbuthnot, who claims responsibility for the murder. and is also indicated to be Debenham's hidden lover. He tries to shoot Poirot but misses and runs. Poirot realizes that Arbuthnot did not intend to murder him and orders that all of the suspects be gathered, which they are. Poirot adds that there are two plausible explanations for the murder, the first of which is simple but unlikely. Cassetti was assassinated by one of his numerous adversaries as Ratchet, who boarded the train and then fled after the murder. The second theory is absurd, but it fits the evidence better. Everyone on board was involved in the murder. Poirot has discovered even more links to the Daisy Armstrong case. Gerhart Hardman is actually an American investigator named Cyrus who was in love with the wrongfully accused nurse, who turns out to be Mitchell's sister, and Mrs. Hubbard is Linda Arden. He reasoned that, in order for no one individual to be held accountable, all of the suspects entered Cassetti's room and stabbed him in turn as a type of execution. No one knows who killed him. Arden explains that she was the one who brought everyone together, determined to hold Cassetti accountable for what he did to her daughter and granddaughter. Poirot informs Arden that he is now the only person who can reveal their conspiracy, and challenges someone to shoot him, leaving his gun on the table. Arden snatches it up but instead shoots herself. However, the gun isn't loaded because Poirot was only curious what she would do. He stands there watching Arden cry. He reasoned that, in order for no one individual to be held accountable, all of the suspects entered Cassetti's room and stabbed him in turn as a type of execution. No one knows who killed him. Arden explains that she was the one who brought everyone together, determined to hold Cassetti accountable for what he did to her daughter and granddaughter. Poirot informs Arden that he is now the only person who can reveal their conspiracy, and challenges someone to shoot him, leaving his gun on the table. Arden snatches it up but instead shoots herself. However, the gun isn't loaded because Poirot was only curious what she would do. He stands there watching Arden cry. The train is discovered and continues on its journey. Poirot concludes that there will be no justice in this case. Everyone on board had already suffered immensely as a result of Cassetti's act, and Cassetti was a wicked guy who had gotten away with murder and deserved what happened to him. He observes that letting 12 individuals get away with murder is one imbalance he will have to live with. When the train arrives at the station, Poirot informs the police that his first theory is correct. The murderer was a Ratchet foe who had escaped. The officers trust him, and the travelers continue their journey. Poirot decides to get off the train at this point, hoping to get some sleep. However, his reputation has preceded him once more, and he is approached by a courier who informs him that he is needed in Egypt owing to a death on the Nile. Despite his tiredness, Poirot accepts the assignment, pausing for a minute to watch the Orient Express vanish into the distance.